Welcome back. Well, ANZ has paid out more than $200 million remediating customers in the last few years, which a meaningful increase since the Royal Commission, which has led to. Chief Executive Shane Elliott is fronting the Economics Committee in Canberra, where he's being grilled about the bank's response to the Royal Commission. He's also admitted that apart from one prosecution underway by the ACCC, it's likely there will be more against ANZ employees.
I'm not similarly aware of any specific individuals that are specifically being charged. We're a large organisation. We're involved in many of the issues that were called into question in the Royal Commission. I would be surprised if the regulators were not considering or doing private investigations or certainly considering it, but we're not aware of any specifics.
There's also been a significant increase in customers making complaints. ANZ says it's received 1,400 through the new Australian Financial Complaints Authority since November, a big increase on the number it was receiving through the previous authority. Joining me now is a Liberal MP who's been on that committee this morning, Tim Wilson. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tom. I'm the chair of the committee, in fact, so that's why we get to have so much fun.
Didn't mean to downplay you anyway. You've given me the correct title. Now, just going through a bit of what's happened this morning, you were quite hard on the issue of bank tellers at ANZ selling super to customers. Are you not quite convinced that they're living up to their word in this area?
Well, I think it was about applying a degree of scrutiny about how they're behaving, particularly, frankly, I mean, I don't want to get into the business of running banks, that isn't my intention, but the concern I had, as many other people have, is around how they're risk rating their own behaviour and their own product and what's actually going on in terms of accountability within the bank, because what we've found consistently through the Royal Commission process is the degree of accountability at every level of the bank has been, let's just say, questionable.
But this sort of vertical integration upselling, are you concerned that it could still be going on?
Well, I'm always concerned about activities within banks which can lead to customers being dudded or being clear outcomes being achieved in the best interests of customers. But looking at things historically, it's often important to see what has been learned and then have behaviours change to make sure that the banks are doing the right thing. And these hearings have really provided that opportunity for people to give that clarity.
So this is a line of questioning based on what's happened in the past rather than any new information you have?
Well, it's about what has happened in the past, yes, but it's also about saying, what have you learned from this? How have you changed your processes and procedures? And also, is there anything else that has been given equivalent behaviour, and have you taken appropriate action so that we don't see this situation again?
ANZ was also pretty adamant grandfathered commission should be outlawed as soon as possible. Labor will do it immediately, the coalition by 2021. Did hearing that make you think you could do it earlier?
No, I think the government's policy is right. I think we've got to look at a review of how practices are operating and make sure that we get the decisions right. I mean, let's not misunderstand. The people who benefit most from removing mortgage brokers from the equation are the banks. Now, if the banks are going out there saying remove one of the biggest sources that drives down prices and increases competition in the marketplace paid for by customers, I think you've got to look at it, frankly, pretty suspiciously. I'm going to stand on the side of consumers. Labor's going on the side of the banks. That's their choice.
So you say, well, of course ANZ would say that.
Well, the number of banks have come out and raised question marks about the role of mortgage brokers. Now, they're not exempt from scrutiny, they are, but when their primary purpose is to increase competition and drive down prices for customers, so long as that continues to be achieved, we have taken action where there's been the wrong products in the marketplace and mortgage brokers have done the wrong thing. We're removing that. That's the right thing to do. Keeping competition is also the right thing to do.
I wanted to go to something you've been pretty strong on, that is One Nation and where they're put on how to vote cards. The latest revelations, it's a three-part series from Al Jazeera, has a secret recording, another one, Pauline Hanson and James Ashby, both alluding to seemingly conspiracy theories around Port Arthur and September 11.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me that Pauline Hanson or James Ashby engage in conspiracy theories. I think it's the foundation of their entire political movement. But I think it's been very clear to me at every point that I don't support One Nation. It's why I've always advocated in the Goldstein we would put them last. And frankly, one of the things that's been really disappointing is that the ACTU has actually advocated that another political party, the one that I represent, go last rather than One Nation, which means they're the ACTU has become enablers of One Nation and their division within society, and now they're also their conspiracy theories.
Well, Bill Shorten has said in a news conference, you probably didn't see, that
No, I'm sorry.
His view was that that should not be the case. He said, we're separate to the ACTU. Obviously, we know there are ties. He's come out and...
Sure, so he
That's
can
not
also
the case
turn
for
around and say he won't take assistance or support from Victorian Trades or the ACTU. If he feels that strongly about it, it's time to stump up.
OK, we'll see what he does on that. I'm not sure he'll agree to that. But you
No, I'm
said
not surprised.
that by the ACTU taking that position, putting One Nation ahead of the Liberal Party effectively,
Yep.
they're enablers. So are the national MPs enablers
No,
as
it's
well?
entirely different. We've said that we will consider preferences once we know the final closure of candidates. I've made the view very strongly about what I think should happen, but we have not gone in a situation of saying that Labor should be put below these parties, which is what the ACTU has done, and that's pretty important.
OK, but if that happens in Queensland, in any given seat, or indeed in the state, that must make the National Party... Or the Liberal
You're talking about
National Party enablers as
hypotheticals, and
well,
Tom,
this has happened in the past. It looks pretty certain to happen in the future if you listen to what MPs are saying.
Well, no, it's happened in the past, and I take the lessons that Colin Barnett has delivered very clearly. He did in WA, and he's come back and said, I've learned the lesson, and that was not a good idea, and has advocated against doing so. Obviously, I have a very strong view. Unsurprisingly, my view is also being communicated to others if anyone wishes to entertain it. And I think in the same way that I think the ACTU should be putting One Nation last or their equivalent extremist groups, in the same way they have a very strong view about the anti-Semitic Greens. I don't believe that they should be anywhere near the top of anyone's how to vote card either.
Do you agree with some of your colleagues saying the Greens are more dangerous than One Nation for Australia?
How their issues play out and their policies play out in different parts of the country, but I do think the Greens are an extreme political party. They have an intention of overthrowing basically the modern structures of our democracy and how they work. It's always been their practice, also in terms of policy. But when you get into the semantics of who is more dangerous between conspiracy theorists and extremists, those who seek to fan different types of division, it's almost hard to separate out the differences between them, frankly. For me, what I do know is that One Nation has has always built its entire political platform on division. Whereas I have deep reservations about the Greens and their anti-Semitic agenda, in particular in my electorate, and it's very hard to just separate them out.
Is it a bit strong to say anti-Semitic?
No. I mean, in the end, they've been advocating for the BDS movement. They've seen that at council level, particularly in New South Wales. There hasn't been anywhere near the repudiation I would expect for that sort of division within society, and I'm not backing down at all.
But their issue is more about human rights in Palestine, more broadly.
They don't take those sorts of positions on any other country, even where there are horrific human rights abuses. They just seem to always isolate Israel and their behaviour, and I think this inconsistency in the Greens. If the Greens don't want to be called anti-Semitic, they should come out and say, we're not going to associate ourselves with the BDS movement. They should recognise and call out all human rights abuses equally, but they always seem to target and demonise Israel, and that's why I call them anti-Semitic.
And finally on this area, is it fair enough for the LNP in Queensland to say, thanks for the advice, Tim Wilson, we'll take our own path?
Well, that's why I'm giving advice to myself, and anybody who wants my advice as counsel is welcome. You know, ultimately that decision is up for them, but I have always been clear, like the Prime Minister, about this, which is the best way to get re-elected is not to worry about things like preferences. It's to focus squarely on increasing your primary vote and showing, hang on, let me finish what I'm saying, which is the best thing you can do to make sure your own re-election is to show spine against the One Nation and say that these people are not a legitimate political force in this country. People shouldn't vote for them. They should be voting for mainstream parties like us.
And once the how to votes are decided in Queensland, you'll be just as forthright in terms of how they're decided as you were in terms of your opinion on the ACTU?
No, I've always been forthright in my opinions, Tom. You know that, and that is never going to change.
All right, we'll revisit that down the path. The short list of baseload power, one very small, in the Prime Minister's words, coal-fired power station to be upgraded, but a pledge as well to look into this Healy plant in Queensland. Is this something, just a little bit of red meat for the Nationals in Queensland?
I think there's always been a discussion around the viability of different power options in Australia. I mean, the Greens have gone out there saying they don't think that certain energy sources have a future, and other people think that they do. And so I think this, frankly, will just resolve the debate once and for all.
It seems, though, it's plucked from outside the shortlist. They've said, here's a shortlist, plus here's a Healy option.
Well, and it will finally resolve the discussion around whether or not there is a viability in the future of coal being cost competitive. The data I've seen has always been that, yes, installed coal does, It's part of the energy mix today. It's going to continue to be part of the energy mix as we shift around with and get the balance right. Whether a new plant would be cost competitive or viable will ultimately be decided by this inquiry, but the data I've seen in the past means it is unlikely to stack up.
Just finally, George Christensen has been called the member for Manila, apparently. More days in the Philippines for 2 different years than was spent in federal parliament. Does he need to come out and explain himself?
That's ultimately up to his electors. I'm not going to go around and lecture other members of parliament. I focus on working in my community, working for my community and giving voice to the nation, and that's what the values of that community, our community, is the nation.
But should he give it explanation?
Well,
it's part of the government.
So that's ultimately a matter for him, but what I am going to say is that, like the Prime Minister, I agree, people should spend as much time as possible working in their communities and their electorates, not just because it's the best way, obviously, to get re-elected, but the other reason is because we are here to represent people and their values and their issues to the nation.
Tim Wilson, thank you.
Thank you.